One of the key goals of this course is to teach you not only about the content of terrorism and 9/11 and things about Al-Qaeda, but also try to build some skills and teach you how to communicate both orally and in writing. And so I thought I'd spend some time talking about how to write a policy memo, which will hopefully help you with the assignments in this course, but also maybe teach you lessons about writing that you can take with you and apply to other areas. And the other point I just want to make at the outset is, sure, I'm trying to teach you how to write a specific type of policy memo, but these things I'm going to talk about in this video really translate to all different styles of writing. And you can write this kind of format of memo not just for if you're in the government or for public policy, but for any kinds of occupations where you're trying to frame an issue for a decision. And that could be in business, it could be virtually in any field. So what are the key aspects of this policy memo, a memo that tries to frame a decision? First of all, you're focusing on answering one single question and putting it in a context where the reader is trying to be informed so they can ultimately make a very informed and wise decision. They need to be short and concise. The reason for this is the types of people that make decisions are very busy. They do not want to do their own research. They do not want to read a 30-page wandering analysis. They want to know the key facts. They want to know the pros and cons of different approaches, and they want to know what you recommend that they do. You want to make sure it's providing the decision maker with all the information that's relevant, but no more. They don't want to read extraneous material, even if it's interesting. So you're not trying to entertain the reader, but inform them so they can make a decision. And finally, when I say frame, you want to frame the issue for a decision so they understand what the various options are. They understand why you've rejected some analysis of the pros and cons of various approaches. Ultimately, they may not decide the same way you do, but you want to provide them enough information so they can properly evaluate the various options that are on the table. And of course, they are interested ultimately in your recommendation because you've become the expert in writing this memo. You have done some analysis, and they may very well take into account what your ultimate conclusion is. A couple parts of a policy memo. I think I'd like to see my papers organized for this course in this fashion. First, an introduction. It's going to explain the purpose of the memo, also summarize its conclusion and reasoning. We're talking not even about a paragraph. We want this memo to be a total of 750 words, no more. So you only have 2 or 3 sentences at the beginning to do this. But it's very important that you say almost everything that you need to in this introduction because it is possible that that's the only thing that this decision maker is going to read. So you want to have a very concise summary at the beginning in case they don't get to anything else. Second, background. And background is going to be the straight, factual material. You're not making arguments here yet. You can certainly shade the facts, tone your argument, your factual presentation to lead into the arguments and conclusion you're ultimately going to reach. But this should be totally laying out the facts in fairly neutral fashion. The analysis is where you're making your argument. You're trying to persuade the reader that your way, your decision is the proper one. However, you do want to show that you considered other options and explain why you've rejected them. And then your conclusion should be a very concise statement of your recommended course of action. So for this course, I'd like to see these 4 pieces of a policy memo, and you can use subheadings and things like that to clearly demarcate what section you're in. Although on the introduction, you can just start with those 2 sentences. You don't need the word introduction. It's pretty clear when it's right at the beginning, that's what it is. But I'd like to see subheadings for background, analysis, and conclusion. So for this video, I'm going to do a mock policy memo for you. The entirety of it will be up on our site that you can read and analyze and tell me what you think the flaws are. but it's going to be about policy issues relating to the detainees in Guantanamo Bay. Type of thing we'll be discussing in the second part of this course, 9/11 and its aftermath, part 2. So let's assume a scenario where President Obama is having a conversation with currently his national security advisor, Susan Rice. And the president says to her in the Oval Office, he said, you know, I said I was going to close Guantanamo Bay in 2009, but it's still open. And now there's 100 hunger strikers. What is going on? How do we fix this problem? And of course, the security advisor is going to say to him, okay, boss, I'll get right on it. So he's not necessarily expecting the answer right away, but so she's going to go back, talk to her advisors, and they're going to present a decision, a memo for the president about what direction to go on Guantanamo. And so this is our task, this is our framing of the issue. So let's talk a little bit about the process you're going to go through to write this memo. First phase is a thinking phase, and thinking might involve research, gathering facts, but the most important thing to do is think through the elements of the problem, what the options are, what you think is the best course of action, what are the facts that are relevant to this, and how do you substantiate your facts, what are the key sources. And you're doing all of this thinking, maybe in groups, maybe individually, and you should be spending probably much more time in the thinking phase than ultimately the writing phase. One big problem writers have is that you've got a due date coming up, you've got a deadline, the pressure's on to get something done. The first thing you do, you turn on your computer, you want to start writing, you want to start showing that you're having progress. That often leads to sloppy thinking. It leads to drafts that are unorganized and end up needing to be totally redone. So you can waste a great deal of time by not investing the time up front to do the thinking. Now it's important that you then organize your thinking into an outline. That it doesn't have to be with a lot of content, but it's going to show the order of your memo. You're going to show the basic sections. Within the sections, you're going to want to outline and tell, here's what all the different paragraphs are going to say. Here's the order I'm going to present this material in. Here are the content of the various arguments. And you'll want to use that outline ultimately during the writing process. And again, the more time you spend thinking and the more time you spend outlining, the easier that somewhat torturous writing process is going to be. Writing. So you're going to sit down and you're actually going to have to write it. You've got your outline, and the key thing is to just write and keep going. Get something down on paper. You'll have time to examine it later, but don't worry about each word being perfectly polished, about each sentence being just the way you're going to want it at the end, because no matter how good a job you do on that first draft, things are going to change. You might even end up throwing out paragraphs. So why obsess and spend extra hours fine-tuning each paragraph at this initial stage when you might end up jettisoning some of these materials? So get a good solid draft down on paper. That's your core goal. Next is the revision process, and next to besides thinking, revision is where all the big work is being done. So you're going to hone down your arguments, you're going to make sure everything's in logical sense, you're going to look at things, you're going to revise from a number of different levels. You're going to revise at the paragraph level, making sure all your paragraphs are in the right order, in a good organized fashion that flow one to the other. You're going to go at the sentence level, making sure each sentence is smooth, is as short as can be, and you're going to go down to the word-to-word level, trying to make sure your grammar and diction is correct, that your word usage, that you're cut as many words out, your verbosity, to weed all that out. So you're going to try to revise at all of these different levels. You're going to go through this document 1, 2, maybe 3 times. Once you've got your paragraphs, so you're happy with them, then you start working on your sentences. Once the sentences, then you go down to the micro level, word to word, even down to the individual comma. Finally, important part, that a lot of people forget, ignore, they discard it for exhaustion: proofreading. You've got to proofread. Short memo especially, 750 words, the goal is perfection. Sometimes it's not obtainable, but you should strive for perfection on anything that you write. 0 mistakes. Okay, so let's start writing our policy memo. The first thing we're going to do is put down a heading. It's going to tell who the memo is to, who it's from, what the memo is about. So here, closing the detention facility, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and the date. So we have a historic record of when this memo was written. All right, next part's going to be the introduction. Here's the key. Skip it. They're really hard to write, these concise introductory synthesization of your entire memo in 2 or 3 sentences. So it's much better to write the whole thing and then come back and write your executive summary introduction. So let's get started on the background. What's our process here in dealing with the background section? First of all, the key part is there's going to be a lot of facts. Guantanamo, of course, it started way back in 2001. Problems right up to the present day. You don't have time to go through the entire history, so your hardest thing is to figure out which facts you want to be in and which you're going to exclude. If you can, you want to tell the background section like a story. It doesn't necessarily have to start, as I said, all the way back at 2001, but in what you do, try to put it in a chronological order so you're not jumping all over the place, and you're trying to tell a story to the decision maker. Even though this is policy, narratives are what work and what resonate. We're used to hearing stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Eliminate extraneous facts. Sure, there's a lot of things that are interesting about Guantanamo right now. There's a big issue about whether feeding tubes, for example, is a form of torture. That's not what President Obama is focused on. Right now, his question was about how do we get this facility closed? And whether or not feeding tubes are torture is an important, vital issue, but it's extraneous to the key thing that we're trying to analyze here. So we're not going to talk about that. So get rid of any facts from here that you don't need, that are not relevant to this particular decision. Now, your factual section, in some ways, you want to present it neutrally. You don't want to seem like you're biasing the reader at this point, but you are trying to lead into your argument section. So the tone, the facts that you choose to put in and exclude, all of this should ultimately lead into the position that you're going to be taking at the end. So you should use these facts to, in some ways, frame the arguments that you're going to be making in the future. So, example, if you are going to be making an argument at the end that there are 4 easy steps we can take to close Guantanamo, in the factual section, you're going to be emphasizing facts that make it seem like this is doable. This is an achievable policy. However, if you're going to argue at the end that, gosh, Guantanamo is an intractable problem and there's very little you can do about it, the factual section should talk about those thorny facts that are going to make it very difficult for the president to close Guantanamo. So you want there to be a relationship ultimately between the factual section and the argument section. Okay, so here are the strategic decisions I made on my background section for this memo. As I said, I'm going to exclude information from early on, how the details got to Guantanamo, a lot of the actions taken by the Bush administration, because President Obama is not that interested in that right now. I'm going to have to provide information on all the legal barriers that were put up to closing Guantanamo to try to explain to the president why it hasn't been closed so far. He's clearly agitated about why his initial order has not been followed through on. Have to provide some information about the remaining detainees because they are the issue relating to whether Guantanamo can be closed. And finally, I just want to point out, on your factual section, you do want to provide sources. I don't require in this course full-blown footnotes that has the publisher's name and the website where something can be found, but I do want to know that you're gathering your facts from an authoritative source. So, for example, you'll see in parentheses after some of my sentences, where I got this fact from. I got it from the New York Times, something called the Guantanamo docket. Something might say a Department of Defense report, or a book, Peter Bergen, 2011. So I know I'm getting a source from a book Peter Bergen wrote in 2011. There's other places where it's much more important to do long-term citation citations, but I'm not going to require it for this class. Okay, so here is my background section for my Guantanamo memo. You can take some time, stop the video, analyze it, examine it if you want, but let's look at a couple of things. I first start off, I put it in a particular time, when you took office. So we know, the President knows he's talking about back in 2009, and I'm giving him all the things that he did. There were 242 detainees, he ordered a review, he issued an executive order. And here's what his task force determined about the individuals in Guantanamo. And look at my opening sentences. I'm trying to make them nice and clear. The case file review concluded that there are 3 categories of detainees. That really sets me up for a very clear exposition presentation of the facts. Now, again, in the third paragraph, in the 2 years after your executive order, so I'm showing there's a chronological story. You came into office, here's the things you did, here's what the review commission said, here's what happened in the 2 years after your executive order. Now, look at my fourth paragraph. However, there's been little progress since early 2011. Again, I'm telling the story as we move forward from 2011 to the present day. It's a nice short sentence. It tells the story. And now I've set myself up in this fourth paragraph to tell all the different reasons why there has been little progress. It's very important to put your conclusion at the beginning of your paragraph and then have the rest of the paragraph be about supporting material. Don't bring the reader along to a conclusion that's at the end. Tell them what you want to tell them first and then prove it, defend it. So as you see, the rest of that paragraph, I explain the reasons that there's been little progress, and then I bring them right up to the present day in the last paragraph. Currently, there's 166 detainees, and I provide a little bit of information about them. So I think I've set myself up nicely for my next section. All right, let's talk about the analysis section. First of all, keep it to 1 argument per paragraph. Even if your paragraph only has 2 sentences, that's fine. But try to let the organization, your paragraph structure, help the reader visually understand what you're doing. Use the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. K-I-S-S. And I'm not saying anybody here is stupid. What I'm saying is it's just a way of get to the point. Keep it nice and short and simple, and that will help get your point across. As I said before, the way to show your structure, show your thinking, the key, focus on those opening sentences of each paragraph. Have them state what the argument is and then go and prove it. Don't try, in an argument section especially, to lead your reader through and have them conclude something at the end. This is a much better structure. When you do it the other way, I call it backing into the argument. You kind of put your conclusion of that paragraph at the very end. Try to avoid that. So you have your opening sentence, and then the remaining sentences of a specific paragraph provides the reader the evidence, prove that that first opening sentence is correct, that it is valid, that it's a valid argument. All right, so what did I do for my analysis? My goal was to convince the President of the United States, POTUS, that Guantanamo, GITMO, couldn't be closed during his term of office. To do that, that's against where he wanted to go, but I wanted to explain that. I wanted to identify possible ways that he could still close Guantanamo, but explain to him what those problems were. And then finally, I didn't want to throw up my hands and say, there's nothing you can do, Mr. President, tough luck. I wanted to provide proposals at the end that he could maybe advance so he could make progress on his ultimate goal of closing Guantanamo. So those are my strategic aims in this section. Okay, so here is my Guantanamo memo, the analysis section. Let's look at some of the opening sentences. My first sentence I have my big conclusion for the whole memo. Under the current conditions, it will not be possible to close the GITMO facility during your term. It's a short sentence, it's direct, it's simple, the meaning is totally unambiguous. Next paragraph, I say the other options for dealing with these detainees are unrealistic. And I spend the rest of the second and the third paragraph explaining why that's true. I look at two other options. One, releasing prisoners, which is not realistic, and another, essentially having the president unilaterally order that these Guantanamo detainees be housed inside the United States. Now I'll go to the fourth paragraph. Progress could be made, however, with respect to the 80 detainees that have been cleared for release. So you can see here now is my third strategic goal of providing a couple of ideas about how progress could be made, and that's what I spend the rest of my analysis section doing. So clear paragraph structure that lays out the core elements of my argument, and then the supporting sentences, not the first sentences, but the supporting sentences are the guts, the defense, the substantive material to help prove that my opening sentences where I make my arguments are indeed correct. Okay, well now it's time to go back and do the really hard thing, which is to create your executive summary. Again, remember, you want to have a couple sentences here, so if they are the only ones that the decision maker reads, you are getting your point across. So here's my GITMO summary, memo summary. I say, the president, first thing he reads, this memo explains why the administration has been unable to close the detainee facility at Guantanamo Bay and why it's likely impossible to close the facility during your term. I have, in one sentence, I've totally synthesized the core elements of my memo. I haven't explained why I believe this, but I have explained what my conclusions are. Then I take one more sentence and I say progress can be made in reducing the detainee population by energizing diplomatic efforts to transfer detainees that the intelligence community has cleared for release to other countries. It is a bit of a long sentence, but I'm explaining my other big substantive proposal, how the president can make progress on his goal. So if he reads this memo, he'll say that Chancer thinks, or Susan Rice in this instance thinks, I can't close Guantanamo, but here's something I could do to make progress. And he will have gotten the basic gist of what the memo says without reading it. If he does go on to read it, he comes in reading the factual section, reading the argument section, knowing already that this is my core conclusion. It's going to help the reader make it through and make sense of the rest of the memo. Okay, your whole memo is drafted. Now it's time to revise. A couple other things about the revision process. Write long and then consolidate. You're going to think this 750 word limit is your enemy. It's not. It's your friend. Because when you write initially, there's so much information, so many arguments you want to make. You're going to do a word count. It's going to say 1,000 words, 2,000 words, and you're going, oh my God, how am I going to get this down to 750 words? I want to make each of you a promise. I promise you that 750 word memo, after you hone it, after you consolidate, after you get rid of all the extraneous arguments, arguments that don't make any sense, the sentences you don't need, the words you don't need, that 750 word memo is going to be tighter, it's going to be more persuasive and easier to read for the decision maker than the 2,000 word memo that you started with. I'm sorry, you're going to go through a lot of pain and agony getting the 2,000 word memo down to 750, but it's going to be a very valuable process and it's going to make it a better product. I've said this 3 or 4 times, it bears repeating, keep your sentences short and uncomplicated. I can't tell you how many papers I have graded in my life where I will do a word count on one sentence, 40 words, 50 words, 70 words with 3 or 4 embedded clauses. Keep it simple, keep it short. Short sentences are great because they give the reader a little rest. The reader doesn't want to have to plow through clause upon clause, dozens of words upon dozens of words in one sentence. Work on your transitions. How do the sentence before relate to the next sentence? Is it a however? Is it a therefore? So do they contrast or does one support the other? Is it just an additional point? Is it a moreover? So those linking words, does it temporally, currently, As was said previously, sometimes these linking words can provide some sort of temporal linkage between one and the other. There's always relationships with the sentences, between sentences, and you need to use those linking words to smooth those transitions. And I said before, focus on the first sentences of your paragraphs. Okay, you've got your draft, you're happy with your paragraphs, your organization, your message, you've honed it down to 750 words exactly. Now it's time to proofread. Why do you proofread? You make a mistake in that first sentence and no one's going to take your work seriously. They're going to think, oh, this person did not have the care or forethought to put the time in to proofread this, and they're a sloppy worker, and they must not, they're going to give this to me and they're wasting my time with a typo in the first sentence. So it really reflects poorly on you, and it's going to just tinge how the decision maker reads the rest of the memo if you have mistakes there or anywhere. So 750 words, let's make them all perfect. Let's make every sentence perfect. Let's make your grammar, your punctuation, capitalization, all of those things that seem, that you learned in many years ago in your schooling. It's time to bring that all to the forefront and proofread and make it perfect. It's really hard to proofread your own work sometimes. You've been with it for too many hours, you've been spending too much time with it, things that have been stuck in there since the beginning, your eyes are glazing over. Get somebody else to help you proofread that thing that you've just written. If you can't get somebody else to do it, at least after you're finished drafting and revising, put it aside for an hour, go have a meal, go do something else, and then come back to it. The mistakes will leap out at you. All right, you've proofread your material. You hit the send button. Time to hand it in, relax, go do something different, and have some fun. Hope this has been helpful for the assignments you're going to do in this course, but also in any time you write something in your job or for fun in the future. Good luck.